defense authorization bill before the week is done. And now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, the giver of grace and mercy, we bless your holy name. Today, empower our lawmakers to walk in your will and follow your leading. Give them clean hearts and renew a right spirit within them. Teach them to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to strive and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for any reward except that of knowing they are doing your will. We pray in your sovereign name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., November 16, 2011. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
President.
Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for an hour. The majority will control the first half, Republicans the final half. Following morning business, the Senate will resume consideration of H.R. 2354, which is the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. We continue to work on an agreement for the bill and notify senators when votes are scheduled. Madam President, we have a lot of work to do in the next few days. We cannot have the defense authorization bill eat up a lot of time after we get back from the recess that we have for Thanksgiving. So everyone should understand we're going to move forward on the defense authorization bill. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be the next day, but we have to do it before we have Thanksgiving. So I hope everyone understands. I know everyone wants to get home for Thanksgiving. We all do. But we have an obligation here. In the Christmas period, that is after Thanksgiving, we have just a few weeks to get everything done. And as important as the defense authorization bill is, we can't eat up days and days of that time in December. We have to finish that bill now. I know that will be easy, so I would hope that people understand if they have an idea that they're going to stop us from moving forward on the bill, on the motion to proceed, we're going to get that done and more. So that might mean we have to work past Thursday, past Friday, and if we have procedural obstacles on that very important legislation, it'll mean that we have to work the weekend and into next week. Just want to make sure everyone understands that. So all the senators are watching and listening, and especially the staff. Just make sure you have alternate reservations to leave Washington. Democrats and Republicans don't agree on much these days, although I had a meeting with some veterans groups earlier today, and I indicated to them maybe they are going to bring us some good luck, because we were able to pass part of the President's jobs bill, the veterans employment, with an overwhelming majority. That was really good news, and I hope that that's the beginning of some good days ahead of us. We do agree that Congress must do something about the unemployment crisis that we face. We have 14 million Americans out of work. There's no more pressing issue facing Congress or the country than jobs. Our plan, the Democrats' plan to address this problem, has been very straightforward. We've advocated for policies that will create jobs by investing in what makes this country great: our infrastructure, our education system, our innovative workforce. Despite Republican obstructionism, we've continued to fight for middle-class jobs, bringing to the Senate floor bill after bill designed to put Americans back to work. I met yesterday with the Business Roundtable, a stellar organization with the finest business executives we have in America today. And I told them that I know that they're all doing well financially. And I went over what we had proposed a week or so ago. That is, we need to do something about infrastructure, what is deteriorating. And I said we were able to put forward a piece of legislation that said, let's spend $50 billion creating hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs. We would not punish millionaires and billionaires. What we would do is people fortunate enough to make $1 million in a given year, we would say any money that they make over $1 million, they would have to pay a surtax of 0.7%. I said, does anybody out here think that's an onerous suggestion? Nobody raised their hand. No one said no, because it isn't. But on a straight party line vote, that failed. So we're going to continue to fight for middle-class jobs, bringing the Senate floor bill after bill, as we have done, and we'll bring some more in the future to put Americans back to work. Republicans have taken a different approach. I talked about it yesterday. They've advocated a wholesale repeal of so-called job-killing regulations. Madam President, we know, and we were able to show yesterday, that the jobs that have been lost, about 0.3% has been because of regulations. Does that mean all regulations are perfect? Of course not. That's why the Obama administration, as did the Bush administration, as did the Clinton administration, have a review of what regulations that are onerous and we should change or get rid of. So we understand that. But Republicans, that is their job-creating mantra. Get rid of regulations. It doesn't work. They say rolling back everything from limits on air pollution to rules that keep our work sites safe will create jobs and revive our economy. The problem is, it's just not true. Business leaders and economists of every political stripe agree this GOP mantra is a falsehood. A respected economic advisor to 2 Republican presidents called this myth spread by Republicans to cover up their woeful lack of meaningful work plans to create jobs, quote, nonsense, and quote, made up. I talked about him in some detail yesterday. The evidence, in fact, shows that government safeguards have little impact, if any, on employment. The Bureau of Labor Statistics study found that last year only 0.3% of layoffs was caused by regulation. That's according to executives who ordered those layoffs. Nearly 85 times as many jobs were lost last year because of a slow economy. But rather than work with us to turn this weak economy around, creating hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs, Republicans spent 11 months fighting Democratic policies that have created these jobs. Meanwhile, they spent these past 11 months focused on killing regulations that make America safer, healthier, more efficient, and more productive. For example, Republicans want to halt updates to the Clean Air Act. Since its passage 40 years ago, during the presidency of Richard Nixon, you know, Madam President, why President Nixon and the Congress got kind of interested in that? In Ohio, the Cuyahoga River kept catching fire. The river started burning, and they would put it out and start burning again. So President Nixon and others felt maybe we should do something about the Clean Water Act. And we also, during that same period of time, did something about the Clean Air Act. And the Clean Air Act alone has reduced emission of key pollutants by 70%, while the economy has grown by some 200% during that same period of time. Long-time updates to the law would reduce emissions of mercury, acid gases, and other life-threatening pollutants into the air, saving lives. Last year alone, the Clean Air Act saved the lives of more than 160,000 Americans. It prevented 86,000 emergency room visits and 13 million lost workdays. This is the money in the bank for all of us when we can save lives, prevent emergency room visits, and keep people working and not being sick. The Clean Air Act has prevented hundreds of thousands of cases of heart disease, chronic bronchitis, and asthma. It's wonderful that we have done things to help clean the air, but we also have medicines that help. Madam President, I can remember as a little boy going out to visit a woman who lived on the outskirts of Searchlight. That's really a couple miles out of the main part of Searchlight. And I've never, ever forgotten this. She had asthma. And my mom went out to see if there was anything she could do to help. There wasn't a thing she could do to help. This woman was so in such a state of distress. I can't breathe, and making the horrible noises that I've never forgotten. So things are better. One reason they're better is because of medicines, but also cleaner air. The Clean Air Act has prevented hundreds of thousands of cases of heart disease, as I've indicated, chronic bronchitis and asthma. And last year alone, it saved American companies and consumers $1.3 trillion by reducing medical costs and increasing productivity. Of course, all these benefits come with a price tag. But for every dollar spent complying with the Clean Air Act, this nation saves $30 in emergency room bills, lost workdays, and environmental cleanup. And repealing the law of the Clean Air Act wouldn't make the costs go away, and instead it would shift them from corporations to consumers. Complying with environmental safeguards is one of the costs of doing business in the United States as part of being a good corporate citizen. That's why 2/3 of voters say scientists at the Environmental Protection Agency, not politicians in Congress, should set pollution standards. 71% of voters, including a majority of Republicans, support the stronger environmental protections under attack by congressional Republicans. 80% of voters believe those safeguards will improve public health and air quality. There's plenty of evidence that smart, fair regulations save lives and save communities lots of money, and also consumers lots of money. There's more evidence that stronger watchdogs could have prevented disasters like the 2008 financial crisis or the West Virginia mining accident that killed 21 people last year. Simply repeating the fiction that regulations kill jobs doesn't make it a fact. But even if there is 1 ounce of truth in the fable, there are many ways to steer our economy out of the ditch and create jobs that don't risk American lives.
Madam President.
Republican Leader.
Today I'd like to begin once again by focusing on a piece of jobs legislation that Republicans in the House have recently passed with significant bipartisan support, and by calling on the Democratic majority in the Senate to follow the lead of the House Republicans by taking this legislation up and passing it right here in the Senate. The legislation I'd like to highlight is H.R. 2250, the EPA Regulatory Relief Act. This legislation passed the House overwhelmingly last month. 41 Democrats supported it over there in the House. Senator Collins has introduced a similar bill here in the Senate. It's got strong bipartisan support. Most Americans are probably aware by now that the Obama administration is crushing businesses across the country with a mountain of red tape and new regulations that it imposes outside of the legislative process. When asked about the challenges they face, small business owners now rank these regulations at the very top of the challenges that they face. Well, one of the chief offenders is EPA, and one of the most potentially damaging regulations this red tape factory has proposed relates to the boilers that are used by just about every manufacturer or institution in this country that doesn't get the power it needs from standard utilities. Right now, EPA wants to force anybody with an industrial-sized boiler to change their facilities to comply with a burdensome new regulation that, according to one study, could put 230,000 jobs at risk. So here's what Senator Collins has in mind. The EPA Regulatory Relief Act would do about all of this problem. Here's what it would do to protect jobs right here in America. First, Senator Collins' bill would provide more time for EPA to issue regulations for industrial, commercial, and institutional boilers, process heaters, and incinerators. This is the time that EPA itself has indicated that it needs in order to collect more data and analysis and to finalize the rules. So it gives EPA what it says it needs. More specifically, it would provide EPA 15 months from the date of the bill's enactment to re-propose and finalize the new boiler rules, which I want to emphasize the EPA has actually already requested this time. This bill would also extend the compliance deadlines from 3 to 5 years, which would allow companies adequate time to comply with the new standards and install the required equipment. Crucially, this bill would also direct the EPA to ensure that the new rules are achievable and realistic. We all recognize the vital role the EPA plays in keeping the air we breathe and the water we drink clean and safe. But we also need to get some common sense limits on its actions. And that means putting in place laws that protect Americans against the kind of regulatory overreach that too many unelected bureaucrats in Washington seem to live for these days, especially in these challenging economic times. As I said, this bill has a lot of support not only from Republicans but from Democrats here in the Senate. In fact, 12 of the bill's co-sponsors are Democrats. Like me, they understand and appreciate how these new rules would adversely affect jobs and manufacturing in this country. And they want to work with us to do something about it. So this is the perfect example of an issue on which the two parties actually agree. Perfect example. Senator Ron Wyden supports this bill because it directs the EPA to go back to the drawing board and craft boiler rules that are more in line with what is realistic for mills and factories, he said. Senator Wyden argues that the EPA itself has admitted that its boiler rules need to be fixed. And here's how Senator Landrieu put it over the summer. With manufacturing being one of the bright spots in our economic recovery, we cannot afford to jeopardize the industry's health and high-paying jobs it supplies to this country. This legislation will give the EPA the time extension it needs to craft a balanced approach that not only keeps our environment clean, but also our economy strong. This legislation is supported by the American Forest and Paper Association, the National Association of Manufacturing, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Federation of Independent Business, the Business Roundtable, the Biomass Power Association, and around 300 other business groups. Too many jobs are at stake for the Senate not to act on this legislation that's actually already passed the House. I previously mentioned an Ohio paper mill where 200 jobs are at stake as a result of this rule. The American Forest and Paper Association says 70,000 jobs in the paper industry alone are also at risk. The Republican House has done its job. Now it's time for the Senate to act. Let's take up the EPA Regulatory Relief Act, pass it, and send it on down to the President for a signature. If Democratic leaders can't agree to take up and pass legislation that the two parties actually agree on, then what will they agree to pass? Let's follow the House's lead and show the American people we can work together on this common sense, bipartisan bill to protect jobs in American manufacturing. Now, Madam President, on an entirely different subject, I want today to pay tribute to a good friend of mine and a man who's been a good friend of the Commonwealth of Kentucky for decades. Whether as a state legislator, a pastor, an evangelist, a radio station operator, or as a dedicated and loving family man, the Reverend Huff of London, Kentucky has been a good and faithful servant in his community for many years. He has my respect as a model Kentuckian. Gene Huff was born October 6, 1929, and before he was 20 years old, he had heard the call to preach and began traveling Kentucky as an evangelist. His wife of nearly 60 years, Ethel, recalls the first time she laid eyes on Gene when he came to preach at her church. On March the 13th, 1949, he came to Newport, Kentucky to preach his first revival at age 19. Ethel remembers, "It was my home church. I'd never seen or heard a teenager preach before, so when I first saw Gene, I wondered what he would be able to tell us. He was so young-looking to be a preacher, but I loved his broad, friendly smile and wonderful voice from the very start. To my surprise," she said, "he really could preach." At the first meeting, Ethel was a 16-year-old church pianist. She must have been smitten with a handsome 19-year-old preacher. They dated for 3 years and were married on July the 4th, 1952. That same year, Gene found a permanent home as a preacher when he became the first pastorate at the First Pentecostal Church in London, Kentucky, the church that would eventually become his home for 3 decades. From 1955 to 1963, he followed some other pursuits, including serving as pastor at the Upper Colony Holiness Church and the Carmichael Community Church in London, and at the Deer Park Christian Assembly of God Church in Cincinnati. He also worked for a time as a public school teacher and a tutor. But in 1963, Gene returned to pastor at the First Pentecostal and remained in that capacity until 1989. Now, many Kentuckians have also come to know Gene through his lifelong experience in politics. He was first elected to the Kentucky House of Representatives in 1967. In 1971, he won a seat in the Kentucky Senate representing the 21st District and served there until 1994. I got to work with Gene in his legislative capacity over the years and can truly say the people of the 21st District could not have asked for a more dedicated, loyal, or hardworking senator. Gene was always true and faithful to his convictions in the state Senate. He was the leader of efforts to oppose a lottery coming to Kentucky, and although he was ultimately unsuccessful, I know he was proud of waging that fight. He would eventually rise to serve as both the Minority Caucus Chairman and the Minority Floor Leader, and as the ranking Republican on the Appropriations and Revenue Committee for 14 years. In 2000, he was inducted into the 5th District Lincoln Club Hall of Fame. Gene continued to serve as a pastor while serving his constituents in Frankfort. In 1974, inspired by his son Marty, who had seen a presentation on a bus ministry, Gene found 4 school buses for his church to buy and fix up, and he began running these buses across the region to bring people in to hear him preach at First Pentecostal. They named the 4 buses Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Before the bus service began, Gene's Sunday school had an average attendance of around 150. Within 3 months, over 400 people were attending Gene's services. And Gene traveled even farther than the back roads of Kentucky when it came to spreading the word. In the 1980s, while serving as a state senator, Gene successfully got a resolution passed to assist persecuted Christians in Romania. Shortly afterwards, Gene traveled to Romania to see the situation there himself firsthand. What he saw so moved him that he began an entirely new phase of foreign missions in ministry. Gene would go on to make 28 trips just to Romania, and he and Ethel traveled to 33 countries. In 1990, they formed Good News Outreach Missions Organization to support their work in foreign missions. Here's how Ethel puts the effect these trips have had on her and Gene. Involvement and support of foreign missions has been a beautiful addition to the tapestry of our lives. As if all this service to both congregants and constituents were not enough, Gene succeeded in many other pursuits as well. He has installed air conditioners and furnaces, repaired washing machines, rebuilt cars, worked in home construction, worked at a car dealership and an ice cream shop, and hauled hay, coal, lumber, and watermelons He once worked as a travel agent for KLM Airlines. In the 1970s, he became part owner of an airplane and earned his pilot's license. On the day he resigned the state senate in 1994, Gene and Ethel raised a 50,000-watt tower for WYGE, a Christian radio station, which he continued to operate until 2007. I remember doing 2 interviews with Gene on WYGE. Gene played a key role in seeing the brand-new state-of-the-art St. Joseph London Hospital completed, an acute care hospital that serves a population of over 50,000 in 4 counties. When construction for the new facility came to a crossroads a few years ago, it was Gene who brought the community together on a Thanksgiving weekend to lobby for the hospital's completion. I'm sure he's proud to see the new hospital and its award-winning cardiovascular services up and running. Gene Huff's not only a well-rounded man, but a well-educated one as well. He enrolled in Sue Bennett Junior College in London in the fall of 1952, beginning a pursuit of higher education that would continue over a period of 25 years. He finished Sue Bennett in 1954 and earned a bachelor's degree from Union College in Barberville in 1960. His master's degree was earned at Morehead State University in Morehead, Kentucky, in 1976, and he also earned an educational specialist degree there in 1977. He pursued further graduate work at the University of Kentucky. In 1999, Gene was awarded an honorary Doctor of Public Education degree from Union College. Gene turned 82 years old about a month ago, Madam President, and I certainly hope he took the happy occasion of his birthday to look back proudly at a life filled with achievement. The number of lives he has touched, whether through his preaching, his public service, or just his warm and steady presence among family and friends, cannot be counted. I had the pleasure of talking to Gene on the phone a few days ago, and we got to reminisce about old times. And I just wanted him to know I was thinking of him and that I'm proud of him for the decades of service to his community, to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and to God. It's an honor to come to Washington to represent Kentuckians like the Reverend Gene Huff. And I'm sure no one could be prouder of Gene than his wife, Ethel. There are 5 children, Arlene, Martin, Marcia, Anna Marie, and Jeannie. There are 19 grandchildren. There are 7 great-grandchildren and many other beloved family members and friends. So, Madam President, I would ask my Senate colleagues to join me in recognizing Reverend Gene Huff for his lifetime of accomplishment. Kentucky is honored to call him one of our own, and I'm honored to call him my friend. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, there will now be a period of morning business for up to 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the second half.
Mr. President, Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I would like to ask unanimous consent that the senator from Montana, Senator Tester, the senator from Louisiana, Senator Landrieu, the senator from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal, and I have unanimous consent to engage during majority morning business time in a colloquy.
Without objection.
And further, that Val Malason, a fellow in Senator Tester's office, be granted floor privileges for today.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. We have just passed through a very significant landmark in this country, which is that student debt, the burden of college loan debt that Americans have to carry, broke through $1 trillion. $1 trillion in debt, and because of the laws that have been set up to favor the banks in particular in this Congress, the debt is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So that is a $1 trillion burden on folks who required loans to get through college that they can never shake off, that is going to stay with them for their lives, for as long as it takes to pay it down, even when things don't work out for them. So it is a very, very significant milestone when it hits $1 trillion of this particular kind of very onerous debt. And one of the responses to it is the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant helps people who can't afford college have the chance to go to college. And it helps them pay their way through college. And it does so without leaving that burden of debt behind. It is named after Senator Claiborne Pell of Rhode Island, a senator and a man who was very important to me in my life and in my development as a political figure in Rhode Island. He was a very dear friend and went almost inexplicably out of his way for me on many different occasions. So I am deeply indebted to him, but I'm also extremely proud to represent Rhode Island in the Senate, to represent a state that produced Senator Claiborne Pell, and particularly as we face this massive burden of debt, to come to the floor to participate in this colloquy in support of the Pell Grant. And I'll turn to my colleague, Senator Tester, in one moment. But I just want to say how important this is to just individual people who really wouldn't have the chance otherwise. I was at the University of Rhode Island just a few weeks ago, and I met a woman named Amber, who is 29 years old. She's not your standard, come out of high school, go on to college student. She's actually a mom. She has 2 kids. She works full-time, and she goes to school full-time, and she's the mother of 2 kids. This is a busy person and a very energetic and capable person. And the only way that she can make things work in her life and enable her to be a full-time mom, a full-time employee, and a full-time student is because the Pell Grant that she gets bridges the gap between what she can earn, what she can borrow, what she has to pay, and gives her the chance to move into college-educated status. And as we know from looking at this recession that we've been in right now, there are 2 economies in America. There's an economy for college-educated people, an economy in which the top unemployment rate was below 5%, and then there's the economy for people who have not had the benefit and the good fortune of a college education, for whom unemployment is nearly twice as high, and for whom the suffering brought on by the Wall Street meltdown and the subsequent recession has been much more acute. So I will turn now to Senator Tester. I appreciate so much that he has come to join us today and to help our colleagues, I hope, come to the realization that cutting Pell Grants as we face our debt and our deficit problem would be a wild mistake, would be a terrible mistake, would undercut the progress that we're trying to make, would be one of the worst places to go for spending cuts. Even though I admit we need to make them, the Pell Grant is the wrong place to look, and I would yield to my distinguished colleague, Senator Tester.
Madam President, thank you, Senator from Rhode Island, Senator Whitehouse. We appreciate your leadership on the issue of Pell Grants, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to address Pell Grants and what they mean to not only our young people, to the folks who are being retrained to find different lines of work with the economic slowdown, but also to our economy in general overall. If we're going to go to an institution of higher learning at this point in time, it takes money. If Pell Grants are reduced or potentially even taken away, as some want, it takes away that opportunity. It takes away that opportunity for upward mobility within our society, within the economy. Without education, if you're born poor, you're liable to stay poor. Without education, if you want to improve your quality of life, it becomes much, much, much more difficult. When I meet with students, both traditional and non-traditional students around the state of Montana, the first question they ask me, or one of the first questions is what's the federal government doing to make college affordable. Because if you're unfortunate enough to be born without economic means, these Pell Grants are critically important to be able to allow people, students, young people, folks who need to be retrained to go to college and get that training, to add to our economy, to get them a better job, and potentially become business owners and down the line. Now, why is this important? It's because Pell Grants have been under attack in the House. H.R. 1 cut $5.7 billion from Pell Grants. 1.7 million students would have been denied access to education because of that cut. Some people in the House even call Pell Grants 21st century welfare. Couldn't be further from the truth. And then, after H.R. 1 was put down in the Senate in a bipartisan way, the House passed the labor HHS cut, which cut $8 billion from Pell. Eliminated Pell Grants from folks who are going to school less than half-time. That eliminates all the non-traditional, well, a good portion of the non-traditional students. Because a lot of these folks are trying to make a living, trying to support a family, and trying to improve themselves in the economic strata of this world. Some of them have been laid off. There was an individual, for example, in western Montana, had a tile business, 27 years experience in the tile and stone business, had a family. Because of the economic downturn and because of, quite frankly, physical limitations in a business is very, very difficult, he had to find a different line of work. Work had dried up, and quite frankly, the back was getting weak. So he was able to get a Pell Grant, go back to school on a part-time basis, and study for a job where there was a job once he got done in the culinary arts, something that he wanted to do, and something that would allow him to support his family. Without those Pell Grants, he would have possibly been on workman's comp or been making the potential of making far less money. So when the Pell Grants come forth in the House and they do things like cut Pell Grants, either their amount or eliminate the numbers available to our students across this country, traditional and otherwise, we are basically doing bad things to the economy, cutting the economy down. Because quite honestly, the affordability issue is critically important as we move forth and people go to get retrained and move themselves up in the economic strata. The other thing, and finally, is just the importance to Indian country. With the tribal colleges, the Pell Grants are used to a great extent there. Now, why is this important? Well, in Montana, in Indian country, the unemployment rate is very, very high, 70% and higher in many of the reservations around Montana. And quite honestly, if we're going to dig into the unemployment rate across this country, whether it's Indian reservations or wherever, education is a key component in making that happen. Pell Grants are a key component to giving access to our students, both traditional and non-traditional. And as we move forth here, we need to understand that men and women alike, young people, middle-aged, that need the training to be able to get good jobs, Pell Grants are a critical component of that. And with that, I will kick it back to the senator from Rhode Island.
Senator Testa, thank you. As you know, we have a very distinguished colleague from the Senate who has now gone on to be the Secretary of the Interior of the United States, Ken Salazar. I see that former Attorney General and now Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut has joined us for this colloquy, and Ken Salazar was the Attorney General of Colorado, an Attorney General with both of us. And Ken grew up in a farm in Colorado that, until his generation, didn't have running water and didn't have electricity. His generation was the first generation to go to college. When I got here, he was a United States Senator. His brother was a United States Congressman, and it never would have happened if it hadn't been for the Pell Grant. It was the Pell Grant that allowed those boys from a faraway corner of Colorado who were eighth-generation Americans to be the first generation that got their foothold in a college and were able to propel themselves from that to remarkable leadership of our country. It shows what ordinary Americans are capable of when the Pell Grant gives them that launching pad. And I really appreciate that you brought up the effects on Indian country as well. And Senator Blumenthal, I know, wanted to say a few words.
Yes, Madam President. I want to thank my colleague from Rhode Island for organizing this colloquy, and Senator Testa, you've been a tireless advocate of opportunity for all the people of the United States, and particularly your state, and so I'm honored to follow you in this discussion. You know, Claiborne Pell, whose name is on the grant, is really an example of how an individual can make a difference in this institution. His contributions have left a legacy not only for himself and the state of Rhode Island, but also for the entire country in advancing the cause of higher education, really putting it on the map in the American understanding of how critically important it is and how it is ever more important today for the United States to compete in the global economy, for individuals to compete within the United States, for middle-class people to continue to have viable and healthy families. In fact, the Pell Grant is important to the economic health and even the viability of our middle class. And the failure to fund it and support it will endanger educational opportunities for middle-class Americans across the country. What we know about this modern economy is that more and more the high school education alone means less and less. High school is vitally important, but economically it is not enough. And that is reflected in an overwhelming, almost an avalanche of statistics and studies. Most recent issued last Friday by the Georgetown University Center on Education shows clearly and dramatically that Americans who have only a high school education are less likely to have a good income and a good economic status. Workers who have a high school diploma alone in 1973 were qualified for 72% of jobs, much more than two-thirds. Today, people who have only a high school diploma are qualified for only 44% of the jobs available. And in 2018, that number will drop to 37%. Now, that kind of set of numbers is more than just statistics. It's human lives and families and income, dollars in people's pockets that they can spend in our economy. It affects particularly women, who more and more shoulder the largest burden of changes in our educational requirements and have been hit hardest in the unemployment crisis that we face. In our advancing economy, employers need high-skilled individuals. More and more what I hear as I go around the state of Connecticut is there are jobs available, but there aren't people with the skills to fill them. When we talk about a Pell Grant and college degrees, we're not talking only about a four-year diploma. We're talking about an associate's degree that enables somebody to run a computer on an assembly line or do welding or the other kinds of practical skills that enable people to fill those jobs, enable America to compete, and enable employers to compete successfully. In 2018, only a third of the jobs available to non-college educated workers will provide a living wage. And that is a statistic that ought to be a wake-up call to the Congress and to Washington. And I think it's reflected not just in the overall picture, but in the individual human stories that both of my colleagues have reflected in their remarks. And I hear from people who not only have benefited from Pell Grants, but who hope to benefit from them, educators who believe that they are vital to the future of American education. And I want to just cite a few here this morning and quote first from a letter that I received from Norma Esquivel, who lives in Greenwich, Connecticut, and who said to me in her letter, I recently received news regarding the possible elimination of the Pell Grant. As a recipient of the Pell Grant, the mere thought of losing such an essential feature of my financial aid package is devastating. I was brought up in a Latino household where the lack of money was often a catalyst for stress and hopelessness. Neither of my parents could afford to attend college. My father worked as a janitor and is currently retired due to his debilitating Parkinson's disease, while my mother is a housewife. She goes on to talk about how her parents gave her the hope and aspiration to attend college and how she is now doing it at Sarah Lawrence because of the Pell Grant. Gina Glickman, who is the president of Manchester Community College, writes to me about the students whom she meets and she sees every day who benefit from these programs, and says Pell Grants not only help low-income and first-generation students to access post-secondary education and training, they enable them to complete degrees and certificates. Senator Whitehouse has given us a statistic that is astonishing and alarming. $1 trillion in debt that our students now bear, larger than the amount that Americans owe on their credit cards, I believe, and threatening not only their futures, but all of our economic futures and the viability of our economy. So I would like to ask my colleague from Rhode Island whether and how much funding is projected to be necessary for the continued viability of this program and for America and Americans to compete in the global economy.
Well, one of the things, Senator Blumenthal, that has taken place is that the value to the individual student of the Pell Grant has actually declined quite a lot over the years since it was first initiated. When the first Pell Grants came out, they paid for nearly three-quarters of the typical four-year public college tuition, 72% of that tuition. Now they're down to 32%, less than a third. So there's a lot of room to increase what we can spend on Pell Grants. And I think it's pretty clear from what you have said and what Senator Tester has said that, you know, once you are college educated, you step into a different economy with a top unemployment rate through this awful recession of below 5%. You step into a whole new set of opportunities, and you step into opportunities that have higher income potential for you, all of which redounds back to the benefit of our country in higher revenues, in a stronger economy, and in more innovation and development, economic development. So we're going the wrong direction is the way I'd respond. And it's time, instead of doing what the Republicans in the House have suggested, which is to go even further in the wrong direction, even potentially eliminate this grant, call it welfare, for Pete's sake. I mean, remember Amber. This is a woman with 2 children, working full-time and going to school, and the thing that enables her to tie that together, the last piece, the keystone in the arch, is the Pell Grant. And you call that welfare? This is a welfare recipient? I don't think so. But that's the kind of attack that these things are under. And it's not just institutions like Connecticut is famous for and Rhode Island is famous for, super high-end institutions that are internationally renowned, but it is also basic community college and technical college, places where people can get a solid career. And I know Senator Tester wanted to say a few words about that, and then Senator Landrieu.
Yeah, I do. And thank you, Senator Whitehouse. You know, talked about the unemployment rate and job opportunities for people who get higher education. I was talking to a welding shop in Fort Benton, Montana. Fort Benton's in the north central part of the state. The oil play in the east has been having some impacts, even in our area of the state. And this welding shop that was in Fort Benton, I talked to the fellow, and he had some issues he wanted to talk to me about. And I said, what's one of your biggest things you have to deal with right now? And he says, right now I could hire half a dozen welders. I could hire them tomorrow. The work is out there for them to do. And so when we talk about getting this economy going again and getting things moving, it is so critically important that we not only talk about the four-year college that develops our entrepreneurs and our business people, but also those community colleges, the community colleges, the technical colleges, the tribal colleges that do a great job developing a well-trained workforce. With that, I'll kick it over to Senator Landrieu.
I'm so happy to join my colleagues who have done a beautiful job this morning just expressing the importance of Pell Grants to not only the individuals and their families, but to the economic vitality of our nation. And I really want to thank you, Senator Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island, who's taken this up as a cause. And we need a champion for Pell Grants. And I'm here to help him and to help Senator Tester, that stepped up to be a leader as well, to say to them that when I go back to my state and check, and the senator from Connecticut knows this, when I go back to my state, what I hear is, Senator, without Pell Grants, I couldn't make this happen. Senator, without Pell Grants, my parents just couldn't afford it. Now, it's not the whole part of the tuition, but I think, Senator Whitehouse, as you said, it's the keystone, it's the cornerstone, it's the centerpiece, it's the foundation of what our students and some of our students who are parents who are raising 2 and 3 children, holding down 1 or 2 jobs, we can't pull that out from underneath them, Senator. We just can't do it. And secondly, I would say that I know we have to find a way to balance our budget. I just left the Go Big conference. I'm one of the ones that's standing in the middle, hoping we can come up with not a $1.2 trillion solution, but a $4 trillion solution. This is tough. This is hard. But one of the things that shouldn't be on the chopping block are Pell Grants, not because it's a government program. We have to cut back government programs. This is the seed corn. This is the seed corn, Senator, for our future vitality as a nation. We need to be sending more kids to college, not less. We need to be producing more engineers, not less, more mathematicians. Now, this is our basic grant program. So I just wanted to come to the floor and join you all. I wanted to personally, Senator, give you letters from people, from children and adults from my state, a letter here from a student from Tulane University, a letter here from a freshman at Loyola University from Aricia, and a letter here from a young man named David who attends Louisiana Tech. These letters speak for themselves. I'll put them in the record, but I wanted actually, Senator, to give them to you because I want you to be able to hear from children from Louisiana as well as Rhode Island and tell you that I want to join you in this movement to not throw out the seed corn while we are trimming the hedges here. And I hope that people understand that there are differences in some government programs. This is really a partnership between the federal government, our own individual citizens, a partnership with them, and a partnership with the universities saying, we believe in you, we believe in the future of our country, and this is our investment, and it should not be cut. And I'm sure, Senator, you hear this from Connecticut.
Thank you. If the senator would yield, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you've just said so eloquently about the importance and the partnership of the Pell Grants, and would just like to again ask a question to my colleague from Rhode Island, whom I thank, by the way, for organizing this colloquy, and his leadership on this issue has been so instrumental, carrying on the great legacy and tradition of Senator Pell. Isn't it a fact, Senator Whitehouse, that throughout its history, the Pell Grant program has enjoyed strong bipartisan support? There's been nothing partisan or Republican or Democrat about advancing American higher education in this way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Senator Blumenthal, and it's one of the unfortunate aspects of the current condition that we have in Washington, D.C., is that a party that has long supported Pell Grants, it has long enjoyed bipartisan support, has suddenly, after, what's it been, 30 years of support for the Pell Grant, has suddenly walked away from it, has suddenly decided, no, we have a new agenda, and helping people who can't otherwise afford college to have a chance to go to college without carrying that trillion-dollar burden of debt, and to be able to move up into the college-educated economy and into the opportunities and potential that that creates. That's not what we're interested in any longer. We're interested in other things. We're interested in, clearly they're interested in protecting the tax breaks for people over $1 million. We tried to get jobs legislation through here that was paid for with a tiny tax only on the dollars over $1 million that people earning over $1 million earned. The first $1 million, no difference. The second $1 million is where it started to kick in. Nope, we stopped jobs legislation over that, but when it comes to a kid who can't afford college, that's a program that suddenly they want to take a whack at. And I think it's regrettable, because there is a long history of very honorable, sincere, and enthusiastic Republican support for the Pell Grant. And frankly, there's nothing Democrat or Republican about an American young person having the chance to begin to climb the ladder of success. That is a common American dream that is common to both parties, and yet now in this strange environment that we now have to inhabit here in Washington, this other party has decided, no, we're walking away from that. And in the House, they tried to knock more than $1,750 out of the average grant. They would have put nearly 5,800 students in Rhode Island off of the Pell Grant. And when you hear from people like Amber, who wouldn't be able to do it but for that, this group that I spoke with at URI was so impressive. You had regular students who were right in line. You had the non-traditional students like Amber who had their kids. You had faculty who years ago had gotten their Pell Grant, and now they were teaching others. They'd made a career in academia as a result of that first foothold that they got in higher education through the Pell Grant. And how you'd want to cut it at that point by that much when you have these people, it is just enough to make it possible for them. And when you cut it by nearly over $1,750, for a lot of those kids, for a lot of those working moms, it means no. We're pulling the, as you said, we're pulling the rug out from under you. You don't get that chance. And we all win when young Americans step forward. Everybody in America wins when young Americans reach their full potential and create industries and do a great job and save lives as surgeons or nurses or EMTs and pay revenues through their taxes, through their success to support our great country.
And Senator, I would say that this program is one of the most effective anti-welfare programs in the country that we fund here in Washington, in the sense that, and this is exactly from Xavier University, a student that writes in, this student is a first-year student majoring in biology and pre-med. This is an African-American Catholic university, the only one in the country, and it produces more pre-med students and more doctors than almost the largest. I know we have just 1 minute. I ask unanimous consent for 1 more minute. She's a product of a single-family home and was the only individual employed in her household. So as she's going to school, she's also employed supporting the whole household, basically keeping them off of other government programs that might not be as effective. So, Senator, your leadership should be commended, and I really, thank you for your leadership, and I'm going to submit more of these specific stories from specific students and families to the record so people understand this isn't politics. This is just trying to do what's smart for our country and do what's right for these young people that are trying so hard. And thank you, Senator.
Madam President, I will yield the floor with appreciation to my colleagues, Senator Landrieu, Senator Tester, and Senator Blumenthal, for coming together to urge our colleagues to support the Pell Grant.
Madam President, is it time to begin the Republican time?
Yes.
Would you please?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Last week during the debate on clean air, in which I opposed overturning a rule that allows dirty air from other states to blow into Tennessee, costing us jobs, hurting our health, I said, why should we be picking on a good rule when the Environmental Protection Agency is a happy hunting ground of unreasonable regulations? And I want to take just a moment to talk about perhaps the foremost of those unreasonable regulations, which we call the Boiler MACT rule. This is a regulation that will force thousands of industrial boilers around America to install the maximum available control technology on their boilers. This is important in order to clean the air of such pollutants as mercury. That is a good idea. Now, what is a bad idea, Madam President, is EPA only gives 3 years for companies to install these technologies, a time frame that's completely unrealistic. This isn't like a lot of the other clean air laws and rules that have been around for years. This is an unexpected new rule on thousands of industrial boilers, which are essential to our manufacturing jobs in America. So first, it's not enough time to comply with it. And then EPA used a flawed methodology in order to force companies to figure out what to do. And as a result, little businesses and big businesses all over America are going to be forced to spend hundreds of millions of dollars that they could be spending on creating jobs to try to implement a flawed rule that doesn't work. Now, that's just not one Republican senator saying that. We have 12 Democratic senators and a number of Republican senators who have introduced legislation. Senator Collins is the leader of this effort. I'm a part of it. So is Senator Wyden. So is Senator Pryor. So is Senator Landrieu. And what we're saying is, let's give the Environmental Protection Agency enough time to fix the rule. 15 months would be the time we've suggested. Let's give the EPA additional authority to be able to write a rule about the methodology of fuels that makes some sense and doesn't act like it's delivered from Mars or Venus or some other planet. And then let's give the industries enough time to comply with the rules. Instead of 3 years, which is what the rule suggests, 5 years. Let me try to give some sense of the impact of this unworkable rule. A loss of 340,000 jobs nationwide is the estimate. We just passed in a bipartisan way here 3 trade agreements, which the President said would create 250,000 jobs. It took us 3 years to do that. It was something Republicans and Democrats agreed on. We thought that was a big step forward, yet here we're allowing this agency to go forward with an absolutely unworkable rule that will cost 340,000 jobs. In my state of Tennessee, the cost to businesses are $530 million alone. I've talked to owners of small businesses who are facing $1 million cost to try to implement this unworkable rule on their boiler, and they have told me they'll just close their plant. They can't possibly afford it. I've talked to large industries who are affected. Eastman Chemicals is one. Been in Tennessee forever. It's as important part of our state as the Great Smoky Mountains are. Thousands of Tennesseans work there. This is what they say. Nearly $100 million over and above the work already planned to order. They're going to spend more than $100 million over and above the work they've already planned in order to bring 5 of Eastman boilers into compliance with the EPA regulation. This is a company with $7 billion in revenue. They're going to survive. But some jobs won't, and they won't be able to create jobs with that money. They'll just be complying with an unworkable government regulation. The majority leader said on the floor, regulations don't cost jobs. Here is prime example that unworkable regulations do cost jobs, and 12 Democratic senators and at least as many Republican senators agree on that, and we have a bipartisan way to fix it. And the House, in an overwhelming bipartisan vote, agreed with us by passing legislation in the same way. So, Madam President, I want to call the attention of this Collins, Alexander, Wyden, Pryor, Landrieu legislation to the public, to the Senate, and say there are some regulations that are before us that need to be changed. They're costing jobs. This isn't Republican rhetoric or Democratic excuses. It's Republicans and Democrats saying to the EPA, we want to give you the authority to write a good rule. We want you to fix the rule. We want a clean air standard. We don't want to change the result, but we want enough time for you to write the rule. We want you to be able to write the right method so companies can comply, and we want to give companies enough time